Welcome to this explainer. With all the relentless hype right now around artificial intelligence and rapid technological innovation, you might be wondering, why haven't we seen a world-changing economic boom in the data yet? We're constantly told digital tech is revolutionizing literally everything, but the global productivity numbers, they seem pretty sluggish. It's a modern digital mystery for sure, but the answer actually lies in a hidden piece of history from over 100 years ago.
Okay, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the AI disappointment, the Solow Paradox, the 40-year wait, from shafts to wires, repeating history with AI, and finally, when will AI boom? Let's jump right into part one, the AI disappointment, because we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room, the current feeling of letdown surrounding these massive tech promises.
We really have to ask, where is the AI revolution? We've been promised that artificial intelligence, advanced algorithms, and boundless computing power are going to completely transform our economic productivity. We're told these tools will make us incredibly efficient and reshape the world basically overnight. But when you look at the macroeconomic data, that promised explosion of growth just isn't there yet. It feels like this massive disconnect between the amazing innovation we're seeing on our screens and the actual wealth being generated in the wider economy. So what is going on?
Well, to validate that feeling of disappointment, let's look at Section 2, the Solow Paradox, because it turns out this phenomenon is incredibly well documented.
Economists have actually been having this exact same debate for decades. Now, what's really interesting is that economist Paul A. David explored this precise mystery in his brilliant 1990 academic paper published by the American Economic Association. He was looking back at the computer revolution of the 1970s and 80s, and he noticed the exact same puzzling gap. Groundbreaking technology on one side and sluggish, unimpressive productivity data on the other. This became known as the productivity paradox.
In his paper, David anchors his whole argument with this absolute gem of a soundbite from Nobel laureate Robert Solow. Solow perfectly summarized the issue when he famously said, "We see the computers everywhere, but in the productivity statistics." Think about how perfectly that applies today. We see AI everywhere, right? It's in our phones, it's in our browsers, it's constantly in the news, but the macroeconomic needle is barely twitching.
So how do we explain this? Let's move to Section 3, the 40-year wait. To understand our modern digital paradox, we actually have to pivot back in time, specifically to the year 1900, to see how perfectly our current struggles mirror the past.
Paul A. David's research rests on a super compelling comparison: the modern computer versus the electric dynamo of the late 19th century. Both of these are what economists call general-purpose technologies. They're foundational, meaning they can be applied to almost any industry. But here is the massive catch. Because they are so foundational, they require a massive, time-consuming techno-economic regime transition to actually work. You literally cannot just invent them and expect instant economic magic. It takes time.
Just look at this number, 5, as in 5%. By the year 1899, which was nearly 2 full decades after Thomas Edison opened the very first central power station in New York, less than 5% of factory mechanical drive in the United States was actually electrified. Think about that. Almost 20 years into the age of electricity, and less than 5% of factories were even using it to drive their machines.
Check out this timeline to really visualize the massive gap between invention and impact. So 1881 brought the first central power station. By 1899, like we just said, we were still at just 5% factory electrification. It wasn't until the 1920s that we finally hit 50% diffusion and actually saw the massive productivity boom that electricity promised. That is a 40-year wait, 40 long years from the dawn of the centralized electric age to a real measurable economic boom.
Why on earth did it take 4 decades? Let's dive into Section 4, from shafts to wires. We need to step inside the physical realities of the American factory to see exactly why this massive delay happened.
In the early days, factory owners used a setup called the group drive system. They didn't redesign their factories for electricity. Instead, they just bought a primary electric motor and literally hooked it up to their existing massive overhead steam-era belts and line shafts. They were just strapping new technology onto old, clunky infrastructure. And by doing that, they completely missed the real potential of electricity. In fact, because they were paying to maintain the old belts and the new electric motors at the exact same time, it actually raised their capital output ratios initially. It made them look less productive on paper.
The true economic gains only arrived when they finally adopted the unit drive system. But this required throwing out the old playbook entirely. Factory owners had to rip out the heavy overhead shafting. And with those heavy belts gone, they didn't have to build expensive multi-story brick fortresses anymore. They could build lighter, single-story factories. Because power could now be delivered via a flexible wire to an individual motor on each specific machine, they could completely optimize the factory layout for handling materials rather than just transmitting power. They had to radically redesign the entire factory from the ground up, and only then did the productivity boom happen.
Now, what those early statistics completely missed was the incredible unrecorded progress happening during those 40 years. For example, electric lights gave workers brighter, safer environments. Replacing steam boilers brought immense improvements in fire safety. Removing massive exposed rotating belts meant workers were no longer constantly being maimed or killed by the machinery. Plus, electric motors gave operators vastly better control over machine speeds, which severely improved product quality. The world was getting drastically better, safer, and higher quality, but the rigid economic productivity statistics of the day, they just didn't capture those indirect benefits.
Okay, let's snap back to the present day with Section 5, Repeating History with AI. Let's see how this historical mirror perfectly reflects our current technological struggles.
The absolutely crucial point here is that we are currently stuck in the overlaying phase. Just like those early factory owners who simply slapped a dynamo onto an old steam shaft, modern businesses are trying to overlay cutting-edge technology onto an entirely pre-existing, outdated techno-economic regime.
The parallel is honestly striking. In the 1900s, it was electric motors turning old steam shafts. Today, it's supercomputers and AI models executing outdated, paper-based procedures. We're taking revolutionary general-purpose technology and forcing it to perform the exact same administrative tasks and managerial workflows that were designed for the typewriter era. Basically, we haven't redesigned the digital factory yet.
Because we are just clumsily overlaying tech onto old systems, we create modern bottlenecks. Paul A. David calls this information overload. You see, information is a really unique economic commodity. It has almost zero cost to distribute, but a massive cost for the human brain to actually screen and process. When we just slap AI and computers onto old corporate structures, we generate massive, overwhelming avalanches of data, emails, and reports. It creates a special congestion effect. People spend all day just screening information instead of producing value, which completely stalls our modern digital productivity.
Which brings us to our final section. When will AI boom? What actually has to happen next for digital technology to truly ignite the global economy?
Well, the biggest hurdle we face is that a firm's old information structures act as sunk costs. They have a massive inertial component. Think about it. A physical steam engine eventually rusts, right? And that physically forces a factory to buy new equipment. But an organization's internal structure, the way a company routes approvals, holds meetings, and hoards data, that doesn't physically decay. Because of this powerful inertia, we can't just depend on the mere passage of time. Organizations actually have to make the difficult, conscious choice to tear down their old operational habits.
So, what is our ultimate takeaway from this historical parallel? First, the AI lesson is that AI isn't failing, it is just waiting. Second, a true revolution requires us to build completely new systems from scratch, not just buy new tools. And third, we absolutely must avoid unrealistic impatience. A true techno-economic regime transition takes time, experimentation, and a whole lot of trial and error before the statistics finally catch up.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Look around your own workspace today. What old systems or paper-era procedures are you currently trying to force AI into? Because until we stop strapping electric motors to old steam shafts, the true digital productivity boom will remain just out of reach. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for ways to rewire your world.